On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, how can the Oklahoma City Thunder regroup with their backs against the wall? Plus, they land a lottery pick again.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. I am your host, media member, and beat writer for InsideTheThunder.com, Rylan Styles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Styles. Follow the show on Twitter at LO ThunderPod. Today's show is brought to you by Prize Picks. It's the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedon. Use code all lowercase LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Today, we're joined by Derek Parker at DParkOK on Twitter. He's on YouTube, Derek Parker, with fantastic draft coverage. He's also technically and factually my boss at SI Thunder and everywhere else in the world. Derek, how are you doing today?
I'm good, man. It's raining outside. We heard the loudest thunderclap we've ever heard, which is, it feels like a sign. I don't know if it's a good sign or a bad sign, but I'm here. I'm ready to pod.
Yeah, I've never heard thunder quite like that, which in Dallas for ahead of tomorrow's game, maybe like you said, it was a good omen. Derek, the Thunder are down 2-0, 2-1. They've never been down in a series until this moment. People are freaking out. Is it over?
I would say to hold your horses on the it's Jover talk. I mean, we're talking about a team that won 57 games. They can win in a variety of ways. It's not like they're pigeonholed to one specific system and they're drastically outmatched in a few key areas. I don't think that's the case. I think there's a lot of ways they can rebound from games 2 and 3. And I really genuinely think they will. So it's not over.
Yeah, I don't think this series is over. I think that obviously you'd prefer to be up 2-1 versus not. I think that Monday's a must-win game to stay in the series, but it's not over.
Yeah.
Whenever you look at this series, Derek, we were in the building on all 3 games, but specifically Saturday against the Dallas Mavericks. What did you take away from that weird 105-101 loss?
Yeah, I mean, it was a competitive game. I think yet again, the Thunder didn't quite bring their A game. They didn't have their fastball, as Mark Daignault would say. It doesn't seem like there's a lack of try on the Thunder's end. I want to throw that out there for sure. But it does seem like they're really, really trying to toe the line between not being lackadaisical and also not getting too jittery and overcorrecting and going the other way where they're trying too hard and making mistakes on the other end. There's such a fine line. And it feels like to me in this series specifically, they haven't found that yet where they're really humming, really have found their groove. They're in a good rhythm. There's so many players across the board that haven't found their rhythm in this series. And a lot of credit to the Mavericks. Their defense has been phenomenal, but it's not fully the Mavericks either. It's a little bit self-inflicted. So again, I think there's a lot of pathways towards improvement. I think there's a lot of ways that they can win ball games against this Mavericks team. At this point, it's just kind of, are they going to?
Yeah, you wonder if they're going to get back on track as they did throughout the regular season, and they've given us a sample size of this team getting back on track. But this is no longer the regular season. This is no longer an instance where you can totally rely on that big of a sample size. I think that there is no need to panic if you're Oklahoma City for a variety of reasons. Number one, none of these games have just been unwinnable, and none of these games have just been like you played your very best and still could not beat Dallas. You have a lot that you can improve upon and could play better on Monday and beyond. But also number two, no matter what happens the rest of the series, it's still going to be a valuable learning experience for this young team and for them to get going. But I don't think that any of it's been directly because of their youth that they're struggling. The shots have rimmed out on open corner threes, and that's just something that happens to teams periodically, as it happened to veteran-laden teams last round, and it's happened to the Thunder in this round. I think that the only thing that would maybe hold you back was, like you were saying, finding that right balance of the necessary intensity without pressing the issue, throwing careless turnovers, and kind of getting out of sorts. I don't think that anything that's doomed the Thunder though down the stretch of these games have been from a standpoint of they just couldn't handle it. It's been from like, hey, J-Dub, who's made fantastic shots all year long in the fourth, missed them in games 2 and 3. And then sometimes it's as simple as like, this is a make or miss league, and you missed your shots down the stretch going up against Luka and Kyrie, who are going to make their shots down the stretch. That's kind of all you needed to know.
Yeah, like you talked about, none of these games have been unwinnable. Mark Daigneault alluded to it after Game 3. He said that you don't suffer a 4-point loss in the playoffs without doing some things good. So I think if the Thunder can continue to do some things good and then find new ways to create opportunities, be it offensively or defensively, I think they can come away with wins. And I think they can do it as soon as games 4, 5, 6, whatever you think.
Yeah, I think that they're going to have to do it in Game 4. What is something that you're looking for to, like, if this happens in Game 4, the Thunder are going to win?
I think for me, the biggest thing is Chet offensively. He's been an absolute animal defensively. Like there's almost nothing you can even say defensively to take away from what he's done. But offensively, it hasn't quite been there. I don't necessarily think it's an aggression thing because he's getting his shots up. He tried to get in rhythm early in Game 3, but he simply cannot be matched by Derek Lively's production. Like I know they're technically both rookies, but Chet has to outdo Derek Lively on offense for them to even have a chance, I think. And the same goes for Gafford. And if they're both on, then that's a really tough thing to overcome. I think Dub has probably not thrown his fastball in this series yet. If he can get back on track, I don't know if he's going to be able to with the ticky-tacky ankle stuff. Who knows? And then other than that, it's just the role players settling in. I mean, you've seen in Game 1, they kind of all had it. In Games 2 and 3, not so much. A few players had it here and there, but they've really yet to put together a consistent product from the bench since Game 1. So there's so many factors. And even outside of that, Shai hasn't really been himself in these last few or in the last 6 quarters or so. So there's so many ways towards improvement. And I think we see a few of those in this next game.
Yeah, it would just make sense for the Thunder to get back on track. I think that Chet is number one with the bullet of he's there defensively. Like he's making fantastic high-end level plays defensively consistently. And the reason why you've stayed close in these games is because of your defense, and he's a large part of that. But also he can't have the same amount of shots as Lu Dort and one more shot than Josh Giddey. Like he just cannot have that happen. And I think he's going to hit his threes, obviously, as you stretch the floor, as you loosen things up. That helps the Thunder tremendously. So Chet Holmgren being there, I think you got to get off to a fast start. One of the ways you can do that is from a variety of aspects. Number one would be maybe a lineup change if you want to go there. But regardless of who's on the floor, I think that you need to start fast, both defensively, playing the passing lanes, maybe getting a couple turnovers early, and then offensively, really getting into your actions quicker. And you cannot lose the possession battle against this team because you give Luka and Kyrie more possessions. That's more possessions for them to beat you either via their tough shot making or via the attention that they get and can spray out to their teammates who are then open and knock it down. So I think that that's going to be key, is starting fast and playing with the more ball security.
Yeah, and a fast start in theory sounds like offense. It sounds like hit your shots, but it fully transfers to defense too, and not letting their really talented shot makers get in rhythm early. We saw it in Game 2. Luka came out and was like 13 points on 6-for-6 shooting in the first quarter, and that absolutely had to do with the 9-point loss. And then in Game 3, PJ Washington, same thing, 13 or 9 points in the first quarter, whatever it was, and then he finishes with another 25 plus. You just can't let them get in rhythm like that early. The team has alluded to it all year of setting the tone and intensity defensively in the first quarter, and I don't think that's quite been done in Games 2 and 3.
Yeah, I think that's what makes the Mavericks so tough to cover is that, either you stay home on their role players who, like, obviously, starting role players, bench role players, like those guys are not able to create for themselves, especially not the way that Luka and Kyrie are. But if you just leave them, open, like you have to give Kyrie and Luka the necessary attention and collapse on them, you have to leave their role players open. They can get hot, as PJ Washington has now twice in a row. And I think that part of that is like PJ, outperformed his statistics. I mean, a career high 29 points, and then follows that up with 27 points. I don't think he can do quite that again, but he also, I don't think, going to fall flat on his face the rest of this series either. So we'll see how that all unfolds. And you get to this point of defending the Mavericks where it's like, do you continue to collapse on Luka and make life hard on him, or do you play Luka and Kyrie one-on-one and just ensure that like you don't have the Tim Hardaway Jr. game, you don't have the PJ Washington game, you don't have the Josh Green timely threes? It's a kind of pick your poison aspect of I don't think that there's a perfectly right answer either way, and so a lot of that comes back to keeping pace with this Mavericks offense.
Yeah, I think in terms of the scheme, I think Oklahoma City, at least defensively, is going to stick with what they've done. Yeah. Point being, Luka and Kyrie are fully capable of making those plays even when they are one-on-one or two-on-one. Like, those guys are going to be able to get open. So I don't think Oklahoma City changes the defensive scheme. I mean, 105 points is good. That's good stuff. Now, it wasn't a perfect product, but if you hold them to 105 points, theoretically, the number one three-point shooting team in the league should win that ball game. So I don't think we're going to see a lot change on defense, especially the job Dort has done this series. Like, hasn't been quite as good as the Brandon Ingram, obviously, with Luka being all-world, but he's done a great job still. And I think if we see adjustments, it's going to be more on the closeouts and hitting the glass, stuff like that. So I don't think an overall defensive scheme change is necessary, but I think we will see several tweaks on offense and in the in-between margins.
Yeah, it's going to come down to the Thunder hitting their shots because, like you mentioned, 105 points in Game 3. In Game 1, it was 95 points. And, of course, the Dallas Mavericks waved the white flag at some point in that game, with both like 7 minutes left in the fourth quarter. But still, 2 of the 3 games have been 105 or less points. If I told you that last Sunday before the series started, you would just love those odds for the Thunder, and they went 1-1 in those 2 games. So, like, that's just something that they're going to have to get back in stride offensively. That comes with hitting their threes, as you mentioned, as the best three-point shooting team by percentage in the NBA. Let's see if they can do that in game number 4. So how will they bounce back? How will they respond to this adversity? And the Thunder got the 12th overall pick in the NBA draft. But first, let's hear right now about our good friends over at Prize Picks. Check out Prize Picks right now because new customers that go there right now are going to be taken care of because at Prize Picks, it's America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. They're awesome at Prize Picks. You pick more or less on 2 or more players for your winnings to roll in. While March is over, folks, the playoff action has just begun in the NBA and the NHL, and you have Major League Baseball happening right now. So you can win 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 from baseball, hockey, and the NBA. Go there and near today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Prize Pick has something for everyone and every sports fan, from basketball to hockey. Whether you can pick LeBron, Caitlin Clark, SGA, Luka, they're all there for you at Prize Picks. Go there today at prizepicks.com and use code LOCKEDINNBA for your first deposit match up to $100. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDINNBA. The first deposit match up to $100. We're back on the Lockdown Thunder podcast on the Lockdown Podcast Network, your teams every day. I'm Rylan Stiles. Joining me is Derek Parker at DParkOK on Twitter and Derek Parker on YouTube with a great mock draft that just released post-lottery. Derek, the lottery did happen. We're going to discuss that here in a second, but with this being the first time this Thunder team's down 2-1, down in the playoff series period with this core, their backs are against the wall. I think that we can both agree that, like, for the sake of trying to win the series, Monday is a must-win. Yes, teams have came back from down 3-1, but you don't want to put yourself in that position. And when you go down 3-1, even though it's happened before and happened more recently, you just can't bank on that. You can't bank on coming back from down 3-1. So you want to tie this thing up, regain home court advantage, and then have a best of 3 with 2 at home. Where do you fall on just your overall gut check of watching this team play with their backs against the wall against 2 killers like Luka and Kyrie?
Yeah, I mean, cautious optimism is kind of what I'm feeling right now. This is a team that we've watched win 57 games in a variety of ways. This is a team that we've watched come back from 20-point deficits multiple times. This is a team where we've watched the coaching staff outcoach others plenty of times. It's just hard for me not to be optimistic, even when it really doesn't feel like there should be room for optimism after games 2 and 3, but they can just win in so many ways. The calm, cool, and collectedness of the team inspires a lot of hope going into game 4. I'm optimistic. I really am.
Yeah, I think that I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm more curious of what this looks like in the postseason, because we know what it looks like in the regular season. They did a fantastic job, and I think that when you look at it in the postseason standpoint, it does get a little different. You're on the road, and you're in your first road environment truly in the postseason, because we were both in New Orleans. That place was terrible. This is a rocking crowd. This is the loud rim mics, the gimmick of all gimmicks that we're going to talk about, because you do not like the rim mics at all. But it was interesting post-game being in there for their press conferences, and the players, it took a little bit to get in there, but their vibe was just not of a team that was down 2-1. Would you agree?
Yeah, it was a little bit bizarre in the fact that it was almost like, do you know that you're down 2-1? Which, again, I guess a testament to their 0-0 mentality, because it truly seemed like they had a 0-0 mentality when at this point they might need to have a 1-2 mentality going into game 4, like you said. But yeah, they don't seem to be phased. It's pretty interesting. I don't know at what point they do ratchet up the intensity. Like, if you do get down 3-1, do you need to come out and really ratchet that up? Maybe that leads to a few more, that buzziness leads to a few more missed threes and missed assignments and whatever. But at some point, you're going to have to acknowledge the fact that you've really been outclassed in these last 2 games. With
that being said, outclassed these last 2 games, but there's no dramatic defensive changes to make. Just being sharper in your rotations and trying to fly out and be more athletic. Offensively, there are some challenges that the Thunder face. Is there anything that sticks out in your mind of like an adjustment you would make if you're the Thunder offensively?
Taking open threes is a big one, because they've really, really been respecting the Mavericks closeouts, and for good reason. Like, their closeouts have been really good. The Mavericks defensively have been, like, testament to them, so much better than I thought they could be as a unit. Not necessarily individually. I don't think they have anyone like a Herb Jones or anyone like that could really take these guys one-on-one, but their flow defensively as a 5-man unit has been like borderline incredible. So I think the Thunder need to just start taking their open threes. Chet especially. They do these pump fakes, and then they drive to a lane where there's 4 people waiting on them, and then they kick it out and they pump fake it, and then they do the same thing. And it's kind of been a rinse repeat thing for, huge stretches of the game. It's what cost them the 16-0 run in game 3. So taking open threes is a big one. And other than that, just getting back in rhythm, getting back to what got them here, because there's been times where there's been some really, really uncharacteristic plays or just things happen in general that we haven't seen this team really do. And I know it's like the high pressure of the playoffs and things like that, but they've been uncharacteristic in these last 2 games. And I think just getting back in motion, getting back in rhythm, getting your confidence back would go a long ways as a whole.
Yeah, I think that with this Thunder team, you're going to look at them offensively, and they got to take their shots and let it fly. And then they got to just make their shots too. Like, that sounds stupid, but like they've gotten some quality looks. But Dallas's defense has been really good communicating wise, and they look like they're just doing the string drill the entire time because they move together as a group so well, like you mentioned. So the credit to the defense. But even so, when they do have lapses and you do get an open corner 3 with Kaysen, with Wiggins, with Isaiah Joe, who was awesome on Saturday, like, you've got to knock them down if you're OKC. And then part of it's going to come down to, like, it's the playoffs, and you're going to have to make tough shots. Like, it's not going to be an opportunity for you to work for a great shot, because the great shot's probably not going to come. So, like, passing up good shots for great shots is not a viable option as you get to play teams like Dallas, teams as you get further into the postseason. But what is your opinion now of this series compared to what it was last Sunday?
I think the Mavericks are firmly in control. I really thought the Thunder would win this series, and I still think there's a great chance at that. But the Mavericks are in the driver's seat absolutely now. They've proven that over the last 2 games, and rightfully so. They look like a really dang good basketball team, even with Luka a little bit hobbled, even with Kyrie maybe not performing offensively to the guy that we all know. They're in the driver's seat, and I think they've shown that they can beat just about anybody, because despite the Thunder looking a little frazzled and a little uncharacteristic, this is still the number 1 team in the West, again, that won all these games with all this talent. So for the Mavericks to come out and do this, I think it's really a testament more to them than it is anything else.
Yeah, I think that Kyrie's not had the great scoring night yet, but he's been really good as a facilitator. He's been really good as a leader, and he's been a pop for them defensively as well as a team defender. Luka, is going to just have a Luka game, like eventually in this series, where the Mavericks only got to win 2 more to win the series. Luka's going to have a game where he can do whatever he wants, and he'll just score 40, 45 points, like something crazy. I think that he'll get there, even though he's hobbled and even though he's hurt. So how do you react in that setting? I think it's still going to go 6 or 7. I picked Thunder in 7. I would lean, if I was betting on it, I would bet like Mavericks in 6. But I don't think that it's over either way in terms of getting to 7 games. And then the 7th game, when the ball's tipped, it doesn't, like, none of the other part of the series matters. It just is whatever happens that night. Because just as we're talking about, like, how, like, oh, well, Wiggins missed open corner threes, and guys who've been consistent for the Thunder were inconsistent. If you can find a way to get to a game 7, PJ Washington could just start missing corner threes, or continue to hit them, but like he can start missing them. So like just trying to survive to that point is what OKC is going to have to do in this series. And I think that, like, you look at game 4, and this is the silly part of the playoffs that's like so fun, silly, is that like if the Thunder win game 4, no matter how they win, the conversation and tenor for each side is going to change. It's going to flip. I think that this series, the one thing that I can confidently say that we all got right was that this is going to spark a massive rivalry in the NBA. This is going to be a game, a matchup that the NBA puts on their most marquee of days in the calendar, because these two fan bases are quickly growing a massive disdain for one another.
Well, it's about time the Red River rivalry transferred to the NBA. There were a few series back in the day, but none with as much vitriol as this one's been. It's been really fun, honestly. Like, the crowd, like you said, at both arenas has been phenomenal. The fans very obviously care on both sides. They've got absolute studs in the MVP 2nd and 3rd place runner-ups. So it's a fun, like, I would love to see this for the next several years, and I would love to see it flip back and forth. It's been really fun.
It's been very fun. Coming up, the Thunder are at a crossroads now, an intersect now in their team build as they land another lottery pick. But first one's here right now, but our friends over at FanDuel. Check out FanDuel right now. When you go there, new customers get $150 in bonus bets. That's $150 in bonus bets on a winning of a $5 bet. $150 whenever you win on a $5 bet of the spread, the money line, the player props, and more. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count, to make every moment more at FanDuel.com/lockedon, America's #1 sportsbook. You can go to FanDuel and track this game number 4, Derek. Game 4 in the American Airlines Center, a late tip-off. We're going to get home even later. The Thunder, according to Vegas, is a +1 in this game on the road. Who are you leaning with in game 4?
I really lean with a comfortable Thunder win. I don't know if it's the closeness and the way that they've been uncharacteristic in game 3, but I really feel like they get back on track in a few areas in game 4. Not necessarily to say that Dallas isn't still in control of the series, but this is a good Thunder basketball team that you can't underestimate at any point. I think they're really in any game, despite the kind of feeling, the looming feeling that the Mavericks are going to win this series. So I lean the Thunder decently comfortably.
Go there if you lean with Derek at FanDuel.com/lockedon. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you, talking Thunder basketball. Derek, 2-1. You just picked the Thunder in game 4, so it's going to be 2-2. And then we have a whole new series, and it's a best of 3 now. And you'll see the Thunder and Mavs finally get their first consecutive off days between games 5 and 6, which will be huge. The Thunder, though, also are at this weird intersect where, like, it really puts into perspective how quickly this rebuild has gone for OKC, that today's lottery was an afterthought and was relatively meaningless for a lot of Thunder fans, that they just didn't even care or didn't even there's so many questions about, like, why'd the Rockets still get a top 4 pick, but the Thunder got 12? Like, fans just did not know any of the scenarios because they don't care right now about diving into the scenarios compared to, like, last year and the year before, where it was just like, oh my gosh, you know every down to the percentage chance that the Thunder could do whatever in the draft lottery. So it's really cool to see that the Thunder are at a point where they're a 57-win team, the #1 team in the West, and they're getting a lottery pick at 12. Obviously, a weak draft class, but still, they land at 12 after the wild lottery double jump. which was crazy of the Hawks going up there and getting their first lottery number 1 pick. Derek, you're the draft guy, expert at Draft Digest. You're on YouTube at Derek Parker, and you have a great mock draft up, including you picked one of my favorite prospects for the Thunder at 12. How are you feeling about this draft in the sense of the overall body of work of the draft? Because I think that, like, when you look at it, there's no victor, there's no clear-cut guys at the top for the top teams, but it's actually better for the teams who are at, later lottery and into the first round. Like, there's a lot of guys that fit the mold in those ranges versus like not enough top guys.
Yeah, I think if I had to like sum the draft up in one word, it would be fluid at each and every spot, maybe outside of number 1, where the Hawks will probably land Alex Sarr unless they trade out. At each and every spot, there's 4 or 5 guys that you can mock to every team. Everything's so fluid. Every mock draft I've done has been drastically different than the one before it. And that can really play well into a team like the Thunder, who have traditionally been very, very good at finding their guy, going and getting that guy. If people start to slip that they really like, that's a very easy trade up scenario in a weak, quote unquote, draft. Again, that, like you said, it maybe doesn't pack the star power up at the top, but it's got really, really good role players that could make an instant impact as soon as next season. I think Kaysen is a guy who we've seen really rev up in the playoffs for the Thunder. I don't know if anyone's going to make that sort of impact, but if you can get anyone close to that, even half of that, who can improve for the future, that's a huge win. And I think you can do that with the 12th pick.
Yeah, it's going to be great to see the Thunder have the 12th pick just because of all you can do with it. You can either trade up in the draft for a prospect. You can even trade back and recruit more assets, or you could throw it into a separate trade altogether. So there's so much you can do with it. But let's just say, for the sake of this first draft pod, which we're going to have you on many more times in the summertime to break down the draft, but for the sake of this first one, who are some targets that people, if you're waiting around for this 8:30 tip today and you're just itching for more basketball content, but you wanted to distract yourself a little bit from the NBA draft, who are some guys you're looking at 12?
So I think there's about a top 8 that I have, and it seems like expert wide, that is the consensus. There's a pretty set number of guys. There's a lot of guys in there that I think if they fell to 12 would be really, really good. I think Bazelis would be very thundery. Stephon Castle is very good. So there's those guys that, should they fall, and they probably have the potential to, being that there's only so many that they could. The first one that's actually in their range, I would say, is the obvious one in Cody Williams, Colorado. He's a 6'9" forward, shot the ball really well, very good in transition, very athletic. He was my last heat check. Go check that out. It breaks him down way better than I can in 20 seconds right here. Cody Williams, obviously being the brother of Jalen Williams, he's in there. He is likely going to be in their range, is the brother of J-Dub, fits their scheme very well. He's just such an obvious, that would be their guy. I think he fits wonderfully. You might have to go up a few spots to get him, but again, that's what you have this future cache of assets for. Other guys include, who I mocked today in 4.0, Jared McCain, your guy out of Duke, 5-star freshman, really, really good. Didn't know if he was going to get the starting job coming into the season. Won the starting job, played phenomenally. I think it was 14.5 points, 5 rebounds. He's like 6'3", grabs 5 boards a game. And I know Thunder fans are probably saying, another guard, boo, but this guard is as good as most. He hits threes, can handle it, passes well. Again, above average rebounder. Really would fit the system quite well. And then from there, there's a lot of options. You've got bigs that you could potentially reach on. You've got swing picks in Tejan Salom that you could stash in the G League, a la Ooze, and maybe bring him out in a few years to hit threes and play defense. There's a lot of options. You could trade up, like you said. You could trade back. You could trade it for win-now players. There's so many options. It's what makes the draft so fun, and I think they have a lot of good ones this year.
With as unpredictable as this draft is there any player, regardless of what you believe right now is their range, just any player in the pool, period, that you look at and just this is automatically a guy that Sam Presti would absolutely love, even if it's not obtainable to go get him?
Yeah, I think there's a few. I think Nikola Topic jumps out as a guy who that's who I personally mocked to the Wizards today. I think Will Dawkins, who is from the Presti tree, will like what Topic offers. He's 6'6", 7-foot wingspan, loves to drive to the paint, relies on craft rather than athleticism. Who does this sound like? He is, I don't want to say he's a Shai one-of-one comparison. Of course not. He's not even close. But there's shades there. I think he's really fun. He's got that cerebral EuroLeague style, really fun prospect, and I think he'll be a really good ball handler in the league for a long time. Alex Sarr's up there in terms of like the versatility and the defense, and he can put the ball on the floor at 7-1, got an edge. Like, he's really good. There's quite a few players, I think, that regardless of where they land, the Thunder could take a look at.
What do you think, just looking at this team right now and kind of watching them through a playoff series plus, 3 games so far, what do you think jumps out at you as like a archetype of a player who like you would like to see them add this summer?
Ooh, it's a good question. I mean, the traditional big jumps out as a person that, while it doesn't fit the system, it would be fun to see him bang around with these guys. Like, playing Chet at the 4 with the traditional big would be fun. I'm not saying it would be the best for the drivers in Shai and Dub, but adding some beef to the front lines would be probably a top pick for a lot of fans.
Yeah, I think that the fans are always going to want a beefy center. But we'll see what they end up doing this summer. The NBA draft will be wild. It will be crazy because it's so unpredictable. And that's what makes trading up also so fun, is that, like, I think the biggest key of trading up is can you get your guy while also delivering the other team their guy in the draft? Like, that's the biggest key. And what if, a top 8 team views a guy that's going to slip to 12 assuredly as a top 8 prospect, and you view a guy who you don't think will slip that far as your guy who you are invested in the most? You can maybe make a swap happen there. But nonetheless, it's going to be a wild offseason. The Thunder are going to be the, just talk of the offseason for the next 10 off seasons because of what they've done to set themselves up here with this quick rebuild and where this team's at. Derek, the series is not over. All hope is not lost, but Game 4 will be the biggest game of the season. Can the Thunder prolong their season with a win in Game 4, Derek?
Of course. You steal Game 4, you win back home court, you grab some momentum from the Mavericks, who currently have a lot of it. I think if they win Game 4, they're absolutely back in the series, if not the favorite to win the series.
Great take, Derek. We'll do this again to recap Game 4, and until next time, be good and be good to one another.